Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be ranking some Guardians. I've been wanting to do a tier list for a while. I'll probably do one next month, but in the meantime, I'm going to rank some Guardians. I'm going to be going through each role, picking out the 3 best in each class, and giving some honorable mentions at the end. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, please sub to the channel. If you like the video, please leave me a like. For each Guardian I pick, I'm going to give my opinions for why I think they're the best in each role. It's going to be sort of taking into account multiple factors, whether it be towers, dungeons, story, all these game modes that we have in the game. Let's get into it. So if we start with the melee class, I gotta go with my girl Ariel as the best melee in the game. She's just hands down a fantastic character, very plug and play. She's got very useful traits. She can be used in 2 towers, seafaring and royalty, and blade wielder is a class that's been used a few times already. She has an amazing special. It does heaps of damage, it knocks back. She can cleanse damage and debuffs on herself and also give herself attack buffs, so she's going to get better as the battle progresses. The area of effect for this special is pretty much a half circle as well, so she can hit multiple characters. She's also one of the starter Guardians. It's so rare that you get this in a game where you're able to pick a meta character as your starting Guardian. So if you do start the game, if you come across this video, please pick Ariel first. Ignore Mulan, ignore Hercules, they're nowhere near as good as her. She's carried me through the story, she's carried me through towers, hands down my number 1 melee. Next up, we have Minnie Mouse. Now, Minnie got a rework at global launch, she wasn't as nearly as good, and this rework is fantastic. Minnie as a character hits so hard, she's one of the hardest hitting melees, and it's because of her abilities and her talents. So on her core ability, she's going to give herself these Heart's Fire charges and she's going to give herself attack buffs. Combined with her talents, she's going to give herself crit damage buffs. So her damage output as the game goes on just goes through the roof and she just becomes this absolute machine for damage output. Her one drawback is her health. She is quite weak. However, if you pair her with Wally, she's going to gain so much armor due to Wally's talents, and that in itself is going to increase her survivability. She's easily S tier when she's paired with Wally, so that's a team combination I really would recommend. But yeah, she does insane amount of damage, a lot more than Ariel, and this is why she's my number 2. Moving on, the next best melee I think is Snow White. On her special ability, she can lure. It means you can run around and pull enemies towards yourself. She's also extremely tanky for a melee, so she does have a bit of survivability. She's immune to poison, and every 5 seconds she gains these thorn charges. Each thorn charge grants her defense, so it makes her more tanky. And then when she's hit by an attack, she'll lose thorn charges, and those thorn charges will actually damage their opponents. I'll say this, her special ability is 1 second slower than both Minnie and Ariel. She only knocks back pretty much in front of her, so she's not as good as Ariel in that sense. She can be used in both royalty and leader tower, which makes her very desirable, so she's my number 3. Okay, now if we move on to tanks, coming at number 1 is Wally. He's just the best tank in the game, in my opinion. It's all to do with his armor. He gains and gives out so much armor to himself and his teammates. It makes him so survivable. His healing isn't really much of a problem because his armor gain actually outpaces his lossing health. So he's one of the most survivable tanks. His special has a cooldown of 9 seconds, which is super fast, a lot faster than some other tanks. Whilst it doesn't do damage, it knocks back in a circle around him, which is kind of huge, and then it gives him the all-important 5 defense buffs, which he then converts to armor. As for his talents, you have to use Reuse and you have to use Junk Collector. Both of these are going to give himself and his allies armor and massively improve the survivability of your team. Wally makes so many characters better. Just as an example, we've got Minnie, gives her the armor game to make her that S tier melee. We've got Baloo, makes a somewhat very underused tank pretty much A tier because he just gains so much armor with his cargo charges. He also gives Scrooge a lot of survivability, and believe it or not, he works really well with Mike Wazowski as well. So Wally, in my opinion, best tank. Coming in just after Wally, we've got Simba. Now I recently did a video on Simba, you can check that out in the link above. Simba is situationally the best tank in the game. When you're fighting melee and tank opponents, there's just no better tank. On his special ability, he has a lure for 5 seconds. He then goes indestructible, so he doesn't take any damage. And because he's lured all these characters, they're all going to attack him. And when he gets attacked by special abilities and heavy attacks, he's going to gain so much armor. Attach his solar shielding and his alluring Vanguard, and he's going to give himself a ton of armor and teammates armor every time he's getting hit. So Simba is just phenomenal. Check out my other video on him. Check out my other video on Wally as well. I'll put a link above again for that. Let's move on to the third and final tank. So coming in at number 3 is Mr. Incredible. Mr. Incredible is just such a fantastic tank. He's practically a melee because he hits so hard. He's got really cool abilities. He's immune to knockback and he gains kinetic charges. His special ability gives him armor. Combine that with some of his talents, he gets more armor, and he then gives himself an unstoppable justice charge for 10 seconds. What this is, it basically allows him to knock back on his heavy attacks. So he's so good for disrupting specials. The best character in the game for disrupting specials. It's just so useful to stop bosses from ever taking their huge specials. Generally speaking, he might not be the healthiest of tanks, but he definitely does have a lot of survivability. You might need to take control of him in the beginning because he does lose quite a bit of health, but once you get that first special off, he'll gain so much armor and then he's pretty much good to go to be left to be controlled by the AI. So those are my 3 tanks. Now moving on to support, I'm going to start with my favorite, and it's Mickey Mouse. Mickey for me is hands down the best healer in the game. I say this not having Jack Skellington unlocked. As a global launch player, he hasn't been available to us. Jack Skellington is in my top 3 by the way, but there's only so much I can do and say without having the character unlocked. Anyway, Mickey Mouse, hands down the best healer in the game. And it's all to do with his core ability. Mickey gains stellar charges every 5 seconds, and each time an ally uses a special ability, Mickey gains a stellar charge for 5 seconds. What this means is when Mickey uses his special ability, which has a cooldown of 10 seconds by the way, this is basically the fastest special ability of any support. When he uses that special ability, he's going to convert those stellar charges into additional heal. He's going to heal 1% for each stellar charge for 4 seconds. Which he can max up to 5 stellar charges, so this is a massive heal, guys. Also, not only that, he's going to knock back and stun enemies that are activating their special abilities if he has 3 or more stellar charges, and if he has 5 or more stellar charges, he's going to knock back and stun enemies for 2 seconds instead anyway. So they don't need to be activating their specials for this. Mickey Mouse has carried me through the game, guys. Unfortunately, he can only be used in 1 tower. That might say to some people that his use is limited. It doesn't really matter to me. I use him every day in every game mode, and he just makes the game so much easier for me. So yeah, Mickey's my number 1. Coming in at number 2, probably would be my number 1 if I had him, is Jack Skellington. Now, as a global launch player, there's not much I can say about Jack. However, I've seen footage of him. I've seen people talk about him. I can't ignore the signs. I have to include him in this. And the reason being is he gives these attack buffs to his team. He has massive heal. He inflicts defense debuffs. He purges buffs. And whenever an ally purges a buff from enemy, Jack also heals and grants allies a 10% attack buff. This means he's going to work really well with someone like Aladdin. His talents are fantastic. On this advanced talent here, whenever Jack purges an attribute buff from an enemy, he's going to heal all other allies for 2.5%. And also, when he uses special ability on his elite talent, he's a 50% chance to heal 2.5% per second for 5 seconds. So his heal is going to be massive. Now, arguably, it probably would be stronger than Mickey's. Lastly, the other thing that Jack probably has over Mickey is that he can be used in 2 towers. In any case, if you get either Mickey or Jack here, you're winning the game. And third on my list is going to be Scrooge. Now, Scrooge can be used in 2 towers, both high tech and leader. He has such a buffing mechanic for your team, mainly due to his core and special abilities. So he's going to give himself coins when he uses heavy attacks, and then he's going to spend those coins and give out focus buffs to his allies. So pair this with someone like Minnie or Zerg, and their damage is just going to go through the roof. His heal isn't bad. He does have a big cooldown on this ability, but the additional boosting effects of this ability kind of outweighs the slightly lower impact from his heal. So Scrooge is my number 3. And then lastly, moving on to ranged. So I don't like ranged, just gonna throw it out there. But if I'm gonna have to pick a top 3, Zerg is gonna be my number 1. Now Zerg, as I said, when paired with Scrooge, he's just gonna wreck because these focus buffs are just gonna give him so much crit damage and crit chance. Zerg has a really cool special with a cooldown of 9 seconds. He's gonna deal 200% damage, inflict shock, and then if you've got his signature ability unlocked, he's gonna root enemies, which is massive. So rooting is basically where your enemies get stuck in the mud, they can't move, and Zerg can just go to town with his rapid fire mode. If you hold down the trigger with Zerg, he goes into rapid fire mode, he plants his feet down, and he just absolutely obliterates the enemy. As I said, if you're connected to someone like Hero and Scrooge, this ability just rips through your opponents and makes him a fantastic character. He's only usable in 1 tower, and I will say that his biggest downside is his AI. The AI is so dumb, like they play him so badly. Rather than going into rapid fire mode, the AI often just like does some salsa dance with him for some reason. So it does make him a character that you really need to control, but nevertheless, if I want to use ranged, Zerg is my go-to option. Moving on to my number 2 range, we've got Gaston. Now, Gaston actually packs a massive punch, and it's due to his special attack, Fatal Wound. It has a cooldown of 9 seconds. He'll do 300% damage on hit. However, and this is the big however, if the target is inflicted with wound, he'll do an additional 500% damage. What this means, in order to wound with Gaston, you're going to need to use a heavy attack. That will automatically inflict wound. So before you use his special, you'll always want to wound, so use that heavy attack first, then use his special, and you'll profit with this monster hit. Gaston's elite talent is also great because his special ability has a chance to root, similar to Zerg. A talent you want to equip here, and similar to most of the ranged, he's going to give himself focus buff, so he can ramp up his damage as the battle goes on. And lastly, Gaston is used in the leader tower, and he's also in dungeons a lot, which makes him a very desirable ranged. And my third best ranged, I'm going with Buzz. Now Buzz can be used in both leader and high-tech towers, which makes him quite desirable. His special ability does quite a lot of damage. He can inflict shock, he can remove armor, and he can stun, which is kind of huge. Great for disrupting special attacks. There's not much more to say with Buzz. He's got some cool talents as well, and he's a pretty good range to invest in. You're going to need to level up range no matter what, so Buzz is definitely on the list of characters that I would level. And that's it, guys. So those are my top 3 characters per role. I'm going to quickly rattle through some honorable mentions here, just so you know that if you don't have these characters, it's not the be all end all. There are plenty of other characters in the game that are worth leveling. We'll start with the supports. Hero, pretty unlucky to miss out on the top 3. Quite similar to Scrooge, he can buff your team massively, and he can be used in 2 towers. For me, I just think Scrooge is a bit more useful, and he doesn't come close to Mickey or Jack Skellington for my purposes. Tiana, another fantastic character I really love playing with. You can use her in Royalty. She's got a special that knocks back and a really good heal. So another character that was worth investing in, and definitely for Royalty because she's the best healer for Royalty. Then if we come over to the melees, we've got Anna. Anna, I think, is going to play a really important role when Rift Raids come. It's just an inkling. She's got some unique stuff in her kit. She's got an amazing AoE special. She just doesn't hit as hard as some of the other melees that I've mentioned. She does give herself a lot of armor, and she inflicts a lot of debuffs, which is why Anna is very high up on my list, and unfortunate just to miss out on that top 3. Scar is another character that's a little bit unlucky to miss out on top 3. He can be used in the Royalty Tower. He's also used a lot in dungeons. He can inflict wound on his special and on his basic if you've got the right talents equipped. And he has a great knockback. My only issue with Scar is he's a glass cannon. He just dies far too quickly for me. Maybe that will change as I level him up, but in terms of survivability, he just doesn't quite have it. Now the last melee that is on my honorable mentions that my clubmate will be very happy with is Woody. Now Woody is very unique. He's this hybrid ranged and melee character, so if you hold down his heavy attack, he's going to use the ranged attack, so you can effectively play with him from distance if you want to, and if you just use his basic, he's going to punch and kick. So he's a very interesting kit and can be used in the leader tower. But in my opinion, there are just better melees. However, because of the fact he's a hybrid ranged and melee, it makes him quite desirable, and for future content, you never know, he might come in extremely handy. As for tanks, it's similar to melee. There's so many good tanks in the game. The Only reason I'm picking Maui out for this one is because if you pair him with someone like Jack Skellington, or if you're fighting someone like Hercules, he becomes the best tank in the game. He gains all these defense buffs from enemies collecting buffs, and when he uses his special, he converts it into armor. So there's missions in this game where Maui can just tank for the whole team and give out insane amount of armor. I will say this though, he's extremely squishy and can't really be trusted by the AI, but because of the way his kit works, I think situationally he is fantastic. And then lastly, another character I don't have, it's a character that beta players have. However, I do think his kit makes for an interesting ranged. He can be used in the high-tech tower, he doesn't have many traits, but he hits quite hard and he can gain a lot of focus buffs from his basic attacks, so it does make him a good range, and that's why he's my range pick for honorable mentions. And there we have it, guys. So those are my best characters in Disney Mirrorverse. If you've liked the video, please leave me a like, comment your thoughts down below what you think of this list. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.